Hi guys, welcome to ConceptKart with SwamX, episode number 2. The concept that we want to discuss today is the is-ought fallacy, which I would like to call the factory settings truth. How often have we updated our phones in our daily lives, right? I'm pretty sure it's much more than we update our belief systems, right? And half the things that you do today are just factory settings that you never really questioned in your lives, right? Let me give you a fallacy which will help you uh, find the hidden truth inside these factory settings. The is-ought fallacy. It's basically a thinking error wherein we confuse two completely different things. One, what are the facts, what are the habits, what are traditions, with what ought to be true, what ought to be moral, what ought to be ethical, what ought to be useful. Just because something exists doesn't mean it deserves our respect. The world is full of things that just happen to be there by accident, not by intelligence, right? So we really, why do we fall for it? Why does somebody fall for this is-ought fallacy? That's because thinking is expensive, right? Our brain loves shortcuts, but thinking is a tough job, right? We need to exercise both parts of your brain and take a decision. What could be easier than say your brain considering something which has been an age-old tradition, something which is old, with what is correct, right? That's like the easiest shortcut for our brain to follow. That's why most of the people fall into this is-ought fallacy trap. But remember, comfort is not truth, convenience is not morality, and tradition is definitely not logic, right? uh, Let me give you a small example, an anecdote from my personal life on this. There was this old printer in my office, and which had an instruction written on it: do not print more than 20 pages at once, right? And I saw people just printing 15, 16, 17 pages on single command, and that's it. I asked my manager, why is it that he can't print more than 20 pages? My manager replied saying that he also doesn't know, because that instruction has been there for a longer period of time than my manager. And he was, I think, about 5 or 6 years old in that system. So I asked around further. I asked people who had more vintage than my manager, and I got to know that that instruction was actually on an old printer, right, which was there for about past 10, 12 years. And that imprinter used to get heated up whenever more than 20 pages were printed in a single command from that printer. But the time having been lapsed, new printer having been installed in an office, with new technology, new software, new upgrade, that instruction stayed there because it was a tradition that wasn't followed. Nobody really questioned that that instruction is no longer valid, right? So you see how that instruction became a living rule just because somebody thought that it's being done for a long period of time. Everybody followed suit, right? That's is-ought fallacy for you in the real corporate environment, right? Having said that, there are a lot of cases where the is-ought fallacy is actually true, right? uh, those are the cases where the relationship is based in actual evidence or hardwired proven facts, right? For example, smoking causes cancer, right? That's like a well-known truth, so you ought not to do that. Another would be gravity exists, right? You need not say jump off the 14th floor to actually prove that gravity exists. It's already there, right? So that's the is-ought. These are the cases where the is-ought fallacy actually works, right? Let me give you a three-step framework which will help you identify whether you are committing this fallacy or not in your day-to-day interactions. One would be question the origin, who started it and why, right? Second is test the usefulness of it, right? If the rule wasn't there, would I still be following it? Second, choose consciously, right? That those three This three-step framework will help you identify the is-ought fallacy in your daily lives. Other than that, everything else is just autopilot thinking, right? So you need to get out of it. Let me tell you the final thought on this: the world as it is an accident, but the world as it ought to be is a choice, right? So the next time somebody questions or tells you that this is how the way things are and this is how you should behave, this is how things ought to be, pause and think, is it really how things ought to be, or is it just a tradition being handed over to me that I'm following it without applying my mind to it? Because that one question in that very moment will protect you from the world's worst default settings, right? Take care, and signing off on that note, we will be back tomorrow again with another new concept on this series. Take care. Bye bye.